Hi, my name is Melissa Sishon, and I will be explaining how climate change affects tropical diseases. More specifically, I will be talking about how it affects diseases with different types of transmission, such as vector-borne, waterborne, and zoonotic diseases. So, to understand how tropical diseases are affected by climate change, you first have to understand what they are and how they survive in their habitats. So, tropical diseases are defined by their distinct location in the tropics and subtropic areas of the planet, and they are mostly found there because in these areas it is very hot and humid, and mosquitoes and diseases thrive in that type of weather. They greatly rely on these two factors because without them, they would not be able to reproduce or regulate their body temperature since they are ectothermic animals. These perfect conditions are made because the tropics are located in the middle of the globe and are closest to the sun, meaning that they receive the greatest direct sunlight. So higher latitudes are cooler because the sunlight travels further to reach the Earth's surface, as you can see in the first image. The tilt of the Earth's axis also has an impact on the climate of the tropics. This tilt basically creates the opposite seasons in the northern and southern hemispheres. But since tropics have less of an angle away from the sun and more direct sunlight than the poles do, the climate there is less severe and more consistent between seasons, which allows diseases to thrive all year long. The climate of the tropics is, however, changing due to the increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. One thing that will change is the prominence of diseases. This is something I will go into a lot more depth later on in this presentation, but basically as the atmosphere absorbs heat, the climate will get increasingly warmer and humid, which is beneficial for vector survival. The warming of the global temperature also causes more extreme weather across the tropics. Some studies have shown that the tropics have warmed by 0.8 degrees Celsius, which leads to both drier and wetter climates. More droughts, hurricanes, and floods will likely result of this, and these intense weather conditions will also have great impacts on the forests. So, forest degradation is yet another big occurrence that will continue to happen. This is where there is less growth and productivity of trees because of climate change, so forests are starting to die. For instance, fires such as those burned in the Amazon in 2019 burned over 7,200 square miles of land, nearly the size of New Jersey. And events like this have caused less biodiversity and productivity of an ecosystem, and basically, all of these changes in climate and ecosystem will overall have a major impact on disease transmission. So, how are diseases spread? Well, there are many different diseases that can spread, and they are all characterized between direct and indirect contact. If you contract a disease through direct contact, then that means that it was transmitted by humans. Some types of this direct transmission include human to human, which is the spread of disease between people through the exchange of bodily fluids. Some diseases that are transmitted this way include STDs and AIDS. Mothers are also transmit diseases to their children while they are pregnant, including some STDs. Another type of direct contact transmission is droplet spread diseases, which is spread through talking, coughing, and sneezing in close proximity to other people. An obvious example of this would be the coronavirus. Then there is indirect contact transmission, which occurs when people come in contact with vectors, animals, or contaminated surfaces. And I want to make clear that vectors are organisms that transmit pathogens, basically viruses. So types of transmission would include vector-borne diseases, which spread by blood-feeding arthropods, such as mosquitoes and ticks. Waterborne diseases also spread by drinking contaminated water, which causes disease like cholera and typhoid fever. And the third is zoonotic diseases, which are animal to human transmission and occur when people are bitten, scratched, or have come in close contact with an affected animal. Tropical diseases have been affecting humans for most of human history, starting with the earliest epidemics being the bubonic plague in 1333. Epidemics started occurring more frequently in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries due to the start of colonial expansion to the New World. This is because European and native diseases were transmitted to thousands of people, causing thousands of deaths. It was such a wide problem that in 1821, the Siemens Hospital Society was created to establish floating hospitals to people at sea who contracted diseases. Today, the organization is actually still going, and they are located at the St. Thomas Hospital in Lambeth, England. Their new goal is to meet the health, welfare, and advice needs for people at sea. Also, in response to this massive spread of disease, more research was done to solve the mystery of them. One important discovery was back in 1849 when John Snow, an English physician, discovered that cholera was transmitted by water. Another huge discovery was made later in 1875 by Sir Patrick Manson, who discovered the transmission of disease by mosquitoes through dissecting them and finding pathogens in their muscles. These discoveries essentially set up the world to develop medicines and just learn more in depth about these tropical diseases. Now, in modern day, discoveries are still being made, especially with the current coronavirus and the climate change that is going on. Vector-borne diseases will especially be affected by climate change because of rising temperatures. This will cause the season for mosquitoes to reproduce to lengthen and the geographic range for mosquitoes to survive to grow. In fact, since the 1980s, the season has already grown by 76% in major cities, which has contributed to over 1 billion people contracting tropical diseases a year. This means that no country is safe from the spread of mosquitoes. Even if they are developed and have sanitation systems, they are still likely to have a greater mosquito populations and a bigger threat of tropical diseases. Climate change also prompts human migration. In places where weather gets too extreme, people will begin to travel, and as they travel, they will be exposing themselves to other diseases. More people will likely come in contact with new diseases, and their bodies will not react well, and they will likely have themselves in a very serious situation. Another thing that will affect vector-borne diseases is the increased flooding and rainfall, because it allows mosquitoes to survive and reproduce at faster rates. Vector-borne diseases will ultimately become more common and widespread because of this. In a study done by Erin Mordecai, a Stanford biologist, and her colleagues, they recently found that climate change will definitely increase the spread of mosquitoes across the globe. In these graphics, you can see the spread of the Aedes mosquitoes, which spreads the Zika virus. The colors resemble the number of months a year that the mosquitoes will be present in that area, red representing all year long, 12 months, and dark blue representing 1 month a year. The graphic on the left shows the current distribution, while the graph on the right shows the prediction for 2080. And as you can see, that graph shows an increased distribution significantly more across the Northern America, Europe, and Russia. So, waterborne diseases are also greatly affected by climate change. Compared to vector-borne diseases, waterborne diseases are less likely to be transmitted to developed countries, but the disease will still be largely affected. Increased water temperature is a huge result of climate change that will benefit pathogens because they survive better in warm water. Pathogens also survive better in more acidic conditions, and as the pH lowers in the ocean and ocean acidification continues, pathogens will survive better. Another thing that occurs with climate change is more precipitation, and this will lead to more floods and rivers, causing increased transportation of these pathogens to new places around the globe. And pathogens are also spread through fish and shellfish that are contaminated. So the more pathogens in the water, the more fish that will consume or be infected by these pathogens, and the more people that will likely consume and be infected by these contaminated fish. So climate change is just continuing to increase contaminated water around the globe, and this exposure will have a detrimental impact on people. Last but not least, zoonotic diseases. So climate change will also have a huge impact on these diseases. After all, in the last 80 years, the majority of the global tropical diseases were zoonotic, meaning that they were transmitted from animals to humans. Even though zoonotic diseases are already very common, deforestation will continue to make it worse. This is because deforestation causes lack of biodiversity, which forces animals and humans to be closer to one another in an ecosystem. This can also cause host shifting. This is where host species of the virus can infect other species through animal-to-animal transmission. And when there are more animals with virus, it is likely that more people will come in contact with the virus as well, and new diseases will likely be transmitted to humans. So the result of this is very detrimental, and it definitely poses a higher threat to a lot more people around the globe. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you learned a little something.